What in the world is happening in the market here in Southwest Florida? Today, I'm going to share a quick market update with you to let you in on the scoop on what is really happening here in Southwest Florida. We've been in a lot of headlines this summer. Our area is getting thrown in a lot of national news reports, local news reports. So today we're going to share what in the heck is actually happening here. It's not going to be your typical market update. I am going to share a few stats with you just to kind of go over high level, but then I'm going to dig into what we are really seeing day to day within our transactions so that you know exactly what is really happening. Now, if you're interested in getting more data, if you like to look at that, if you want to dive in more, you can shoot us a text message, you can put a comment below, send us an email through our website or email address, and we're happy to get you all the market reports that come out from our board of realtors, and even to jump on a call with you to give you more detail about what is going down. So at the end of the day, it's a buyer's market here in Southwest Florida. It is a great time to be a buyer. That does not mean that houses are not still selling. So if you're considering selling or if you need to sell, don't be discouraged because we are still selling houses every week. It can be done even in this market. So real briefly, I'm just gonna highlight a couple of our local area stats, and I'm going to have them broken down because we have got more than one county here. So we're gonna talk about Collier County, which is more Naples, and we're gonna talk about Lee County, which is Bonita, Estero, Fort Myers, Cape Coral, that's the one you keep hearing about. So they are worked into these statistics. Just so you know, if you want, again, anything specific or you want anything broken out, I'm happy to do that for you. Just reach out to me. So let's talk about median sales price. So in quarter one, and I'm gonna be just reviewing my notes here to make sure I get the numbers correctly. Quarter one median sales price in Collier County was $865,000. End of quarter two, $780,000. So you can see a little bit of a reduction there, not crazy. And I do just want to preface it by saying that there are pockets that are still doing really, really well, and there are pockets that are struggling more. So we're looking at averages here. We're looking at median results that take into account all different areas of the market. So just like anywhere, location, certain communities, waterfront property, and Naples in general, all of the good Naples zip codes, they still hold on pretty well. Collier County is going to also include Immokalee in some of the outside areas in addition to Naples. So again, these are averages we're looking at here, medians. In Lee County, quarter one, the median sales price was $400,000, and in quarter two, $384,635. So not a huge amount of difference there, but a slight decrease, which is not surprising given all the data that I'm about to share with you. Next, we're going to talk about the active inventory numbers. In Collier County, quarter one, just under 4,000 listings. End of quarter two, it had gone down to 3,251, and end of July, 2,572. We are seeing that trend down. This is not uncommon. This is typically what we see here. I'll talk more about that in just a second. Lee County, we were just under 10,000 listings at the end of quarter one. End of quarter two, just under 8,900, and end of July, 8,341. We are sitting in the beginning of September, so we do not have our data through August yet. It will be coming. But let's talk about that a little bit. So as you all know, January, February, March is our heart of season. We always see an increase in population, and we also always see an increase in inventory because people are back. So we have a lot of sellers who are ready to get on the market. So it is common for us to see a big jump in first quarter, and then a lot of sellers decide to take it off the market, pull it off for the summer. Sometimes they give up, they're gonna wait for next season. There's a lot of reasons why they might do that, but then we do tend to see our numbers go down in the summer. So these are in alignment with what we typically see in our market here. All right, let's talk about months of inventory because that has been one of the big points that we continue to make is that our inventory numbers have risen significantly, especially if we compare them to COVID time when we had very little inventory because everybody was moving to Florida. So Collier County, quarter one, there was 11 months of inventory. And I also want to point out, I'm talking just about single family homes here today. There's a whole nother set of data for condos. The condo market is definitely struggling a little bit right now. If you're interested in a condo, want to talk more about a condo, let's set up a time, use the Calendly link below, and we can go through the same data for you on condos. But for the purposes of today's video, we are just talking single family homes. All right, back to months of inventory for Collier County. 11 months in quarter one, 9.2 in quarter two, July down to 8.3. So it kind of goes along with the trend of our active inventory going down. Same with our months of inventory. As more listings come off the market for whatever reason, that number's gonna go down. Lee County, Q1 was 9 months, Q2, 7.9 months, and in July, 7.4. So again, following the same trend line, this is not surprising to me. All right, now this is one that if you are a buyer that you definitely want to pay attention to, and that is the median percentage of sales price to original list price. In Collier County, Q1, that was 92.2%, Q2 dropped down to 90, and in July, 88.9%. So again, this is not surprising because we have more choices. We have more inventory on the market. There is more negotiating that is going on. So we have some sellers that are still hoping that they're gonna get COVID pricing, not the case. And some of them are taking a little longer to come on board with where our market is at. That really skews those numbers. In Lee County, they look a little better. Q1, 94.3%, Q2, 93.2%, and July, 92.8%. So why that is, who knows? Maybe sellers are being a little more reasonable in Lee County. I don't know. Last stat we're gonna cover before I get into more interesting anecdotal information of what is happening in our market is our days on market. Collier County, 72 in Q1, 77 end of Q2, July up to 90. Again, not surprising. This is in line with what we see this time of year. The reality is that this is our slowest market in the summer. Now, I didn't say bad market. It's our slowest market. There are some great opportunities to be had. We're gonna talk more on that here in a minute. Just wanna share Lee County days on market. Q1 was 60, Q2, 65, and end of July, 70. So just like Collier County, kind of creeping up. What does all this mean? Well, here's what we're seeing. First of all, as I already spoke, we are clearly squarely in a buyer's market when you look at all of the data, the amount of inventory, the amount of days on market. But I want to share some of the market dynamics that we are seeing every day, week in, week out right now, because some things have changed over the last couple years. The first thing we're noticing is that sellers are accepting home sale contingencies again. So if you are a buyer who's got a home to sell, this is good news for you. For the last few years, those have just been a flat out no. There have not been many sellers who would even be willing to entertain a conversation about it, much less actually getting one as part of a contract. We are seeing them more regularly again. This is how it used to be back in like 2018, 2019. They were more common. They're becoming common again. Now, is it best that you have your home on the market already and with the pending contract? And ideally through the inspection period? Yes, that is a much stronger contingency to come in when negotiating. It is a really tough sell to come in a market that is declining, in a market time that is going up, to come to a seller and say, hey, Mr. Seller, I've got a great offer for you and I'm gonna be listing my house. It'll be on the market in a couple weeks and it's probably gonna sell really fast. These are real conversations that I've had with agents who have brought offers from their buyers, and let me tell you, there was multiple instances my sellers did not choose to move forward with those contingencies. And 2 months later, those buyers are back looking at the house again. And guess what? Still don't have their own house under contract. So pros and cons when you're considering offer terms, whether you're the buyer or the seller, but just a few notes there. We are seeing home sale contingencies again. Next, we are seeing in some cases, if a buyer comes in with an offer and a seller counters back or counters strong, counters anywhere really, we are seeing in some cases where the buyers just choose to walk away. There are a lot of options. So if they're not fully in love and if they're not 100% committed, they might just move on to the next house. So again, it's not something to be fearful of. Everybody still has to do the right thing. Everybody is still in control to make the best decision for their circumstances and their family, but we are seeing this happen. This is definitely one of the dynamic market things we are seeing right now. Next, we are also seeing buyers who might choose to walk away after home inspection if the sellers aren't willing to come to the table with repairs. So depending on what kind of contract you're on, if you're on an as-is contract, the buyer does have the right to walk away during that time period for any reason And we are seeing them sometimes execute that right to walk away because a seller's not willing to maybe fix, it might even be cosmetic items. The other thing we're seeing is we are seeing buyers ask for pretty much a whole lot of things to be repaired. They're wanting that house to come in and be tip-top shape so that they don't have to deal with it, they move in. So even if it's a cosmetic item or something that maybe we would not regularly recommend that a seller repair, in this market, sellers need to be really open to looking at that list very closely and seeing how they can come to agreement with the buyer on the other side. We're seeing some crazy things in this marketplace. The next thing we're seeing, every week we're seeing about 25% of contracts fall out. So they were pending and they go back to market. There's a lot of reasons for this. One might be what we just talked about with the home inspection. Another might be the buyer might have found a different house that came on the market and they decided to pursue that one. There's all kinds of reasons why this might happen. They might just wake up and feel like they don't like the color of the house. So it can be frustrating. This is why when we're negotiating terms, we want to make sure to negotiate very solid terms for our sellers and really fair terms for the buyers. It's going to vary a little bit depending on which side of the transaction you're on, but our goal is to put together the strongest transaction, the strongest set of terms to get through to the closing table. That's it. All right, next, we're dealing with this in a transaction right now. So we saw during COVID that there were a lot of appraisal gaps because the appraisals could not keep up with how quickly the home values were going up, especially down here in Florida. One house would sell, the next month, the exact same house, finished exact the same, might sell for $50,000 more. And what we saw was that appraisals couldn't keep up. Well, now we're kind of on the flip side of it. So we just kind of we're going through a transaction right now where the appraisal on a home that we have the buyer came in light, and it came in pretty light. And the reality is none of us agree with the appraisal. There are actually comps that completely support the purchase price that was negotiated on this deal. But the appraisal is one person's opinion of one price and time. It was for a VA product, so that appraisal is going to stick with the house. And the reality is the buyer and sellers have to come to the table to see what they can work out, to see whether or not we can move through and progress and come to agreement on it. Truly, it's kind of crazy. I don't agree with the appraisal. I see all kinds of comps that support the sales price, but it's really difficult to challenge an appraisal. Can it be done? Very rarely, in my experience, can it be done. And, you know, the appraiser took what he thought the comps were. He really discounted them grossly, well above what I think the market change has been, but I am not an appraiser. So all I can do is look at the data, share it with all the parties, and then we have to try to get together and come to resolution on that. But this is something that we're probably going to be seeing a little more in the future. So it does not mean the sky is falling. It just means it's something that there needs to be awareness to as you're moving through a contract, whether you're on the seller side or the buyer side, because it impacts everybody involved in that transaction. And then one other side note, I just want to talk about that can really impact a transaction, and that is a long close. We're starting to have conversations with people who are like, well, I want this property, but I don't want to close for a few months. There are some challenges with long closes, especially if you have a loan product involved. If you have our average closing time here is about 35 days. We do have a lot of stuff that closes with cash. But even when there's loan products, most of our loans can be closed pretty quickly at this point. In fact, a lot of times it's the association approvals that require the closing date to be 30 days or more out, not the lender, not anything else. Everything else is moving through pretty quickly. But in my experience, here is what can happen when you have too long of a close. One, right now, the reality is we're in storm season. So anything could happen with the weather, and that's just the truth. And it doesn't do us any good to pretend that might not happen. Now, should we stop everything because we might get a storm? Absolutely not. And there are provisions in the contract to handle what has to happen in the event that a named storm comes with when you are pending on a deal. So it is not, it can be a big deal, but that's not really something to hold us up. But outside of that, what our experience has been is that if you have a loan that's going to be 60, 70 days before closing, we notice that the lenders tend to, or the underwriters, whoever it might be, whoever's processing the paperwork, they tend to go work backwards from closing date versus from when it comes in. So if you have a 30-day financing contingency, but you have a 75-day loan close, there is a long gap there. And in our experience, even when we're trying to say to the lender, we've got to get through this, we've got to put the contingency in place, we have a contingency that we're going to need to release, we need to make sure the appraisal gets ordered, we got to make sure that everything is moving through the process. A lot of times that just gets bumped because it is not the next loan that's closing. In our experience, I'm sure there are some lenders that don't operate this way, but there is some risk if you do too long of a close. So this is just a side note on something that we're dealing with currently. And I just want to throw that out there that you can do it. We can do a longer close if that is truly the best thing for all the parties, but we definitely got to make sure that we're staying on that loan process and moving it through. If it's cash, no big deal. Cash is pretty easy. We just got to make sure the title company is doing everything they need to do and they run like a well-oiled machine. So what does all this mean for you? Well, if you're considering buying in Florida and you've been sitting on the fence and you've been watching, this might be a time for you to make a go of it. Interest rates continue to kind of come down. There's some shifting happening. We're starting to see a little more activity pick up here. Our inventory has come down a little bit, but we do still have people who are sitting on the market and are wanting to close and make deals. So it is a great time to be a buyer because there's not as much buyer activity right now, although, like I said, we're seeing it pick up right now. And the other thing we know is pretty much like clockwork. As soon as it starts getting cold up north, as soon as we inch closer to October and those morning freeze warnings, that's when people start coming back. That's when people start shifting to get me out of this cold and down to the warmth. So there is going to be a switch that starts to happen. So if you're sitting on the fence, let's have a conversation because it might be a great time for you to snag the Southwest Florida home that you've been dreaming about, that you've been thinking about. And if you're a seller, listen, there are still homes that are moving, but here's what we know for sure. Buyers have options. So it has never been more critical for you to price your home right, for it to be in tip-top condition, no projects. And if you have projects, that's okay, but you have to account for it in pricing and incredible marketing. It is more important than ever for you to get the exposure that you need for your house. But houses are still selling. Our market is still moving. Has it changed? Yes. Are some parts doing better than others? Yes. You've seen Cape Coral in the news. It is struggling a little bit right now. It definitely has more inventory. It definitely has a longer market time, and it definitely is reducing in price. But again, if you're thinking about Cape Coral, this could be the perfect time for you to make a move on a Cape Coral house. We want to know what questions you have. How can we help you make a decision? Use the Calendly link below to set up time. We can sit down, we can have a chat, we can make a plan, we can talk about when you're thinking of moving, or if you've already decided to move, when is the best time for you? Because we want to help you live joy too.